Welcome everyone and welcome to Psyched. Every Wednesday we talk psychology and we talk about stuff, experiments and actual scientific insights that can be translated into the workplace. And always joining me each Wednesday is my co-host and co-conspirator, Andrea Chu, our psychologist and resident psychologist at home. Andrea, we've been talking about so many different fun, sometimes not so fun, right? Like the Stanford Prison Experiment, psychological insights from experiments and from scientific studies that has helped us in terms of understanding why people behave in a certain way in the workplace. And we understand how environment can actually cause you to behave in a certain way. And when you tweak the environment, you tweak behavior. We've seen Milligram's experiment where learned helplessness and other issues is something that sometimes over a period of time we actually learn how to become helpless. We learn how to lose hope, and there's ways to eradicate it. And there's ways in the workplace that sometimes becomes a hopeless workplace. Today we're going to talk a little bit about something very different, right? We're going to talk about giving and happiness. And I always love this quote that goes, right, if you want happiness for an hour, take a nap. If you want happiness for a day, go fishing. If you want happiness for a year, inherit a fortune. But if you want happiness for a lifetime, help somebody. And I think today that's what we're going to talk a little bit about, right? It's about giving and happiness and how they sort of correlate with each other and how each of it is intertwined in many, many different ways. And I've seen there's so many quotes, right? I mean, from even the early days, St. Francis of Assisi say, for it is in giving that we receive. Leo Tolstoy, who talks about the sole meaning of life is to serve humanity. Winston Churchill said, we make a living by what we get, we make a life by what we give. And Mohammad Yunus, who was on our Leaderonomics show a number of years ago, he made this comment in the show, making money is happiness, making other people happy is super happiness, right? And giving back to you is good for you as it is for those you are helping, because giving gives you purpose. When you have a purpose-driven life, you're a happier purpose. And we've seen that with the outpouring of oxytocin, right? When people help each other, it's not just the person that is being helped that feels good. It's also the person helping, and it's the person observing the person getting help that is excited, and oxytocin is released, creating that whole love bond sort of environment. So tell us today, what are we talking about, and what are some of the scientific insights that we're going to learn? The Good Samaritan experiment, right? Talk to us about that and tell us who's our special guest that we're going to have today, Andrea.
Okay, cool. So I think I'll start with the Good Samaritan experiment. So this was done in the 1970s in Princeton University, New Jersey, right? So Daly and Batson, they decided to create a very ironical experiment, actually. So they got a group of students who were actually seminarians, and they were supposed to have a task, and the task is to deliver a preaching session on the Good Samaritan. And some of them were told that you have to do it in a certain time and need to get to one building to the other in this short amount of time and deliver that speech or that preaching session, right? And so they have different groups where they have different levels of urgency to get to that building and deliver that. And what they did was they placed a man in between those two buildings at the stepway. And this man was I think in pain or in something, in a distressed mode. And he didn't have food, he didn't have, he was really looking like a beggar and stuff like that. So what they found was, interestingly, people who had this urgency to rush to the other building reduced levels of helping, right? They didn't have time to help, to put it very bluntly. Those were the laymen. They didn't have time to help. They just say, okay, bye, I'm going to rush and go towards that. And what they found as well, it's actually related also to their personality. So, for example, if somebody is very altruistic or have this need to give, they might be rushing, but they actually tell the person in front of the building, say, please go and help this person. He's in pain. I'm rushing here, but help him, right? So there were a group of people who did that. And that shows that they have this level of altruism in them. Right, so that's the gist of the Good Samaritan. And I think we want to show you a quick video of how this Good Samaritan experiment has become a global social experiment elsewhere. Right, so Sashi, you want to pull that video up and show what happened?
Sure. And I think just before he does that, I think a very important point about which we just flashed on the screen. Sometimes it's personality, sometimes it's situation. because of the fact that I'm so busy I have to run, or we call this the situationism. And I think we will talk a little bit more when we bring our guests in about that. But let's watch this little short clip on the Good Samaritan experiment reincarnated, I guess.
How you doing, man? Is it okay if you could spare that slice for me, please?
Nah, man, I work for this, bro.
Hi, how you doing, man?
What's up, man?
Can I please have a slice? I'm very hungry.
I'm sorry, brother. I can't. Not today.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to do, dude. Like, I don't get my money till next week. And
Look, excuse me. Can I have a extra slice? I'm hungry.
No. Fuck out of here.
what do I do?
You alright, dude?
Huh?
Okay?
Yeah, I need to give my daughter medicine, and it's like, I don't know what to do, man. Like, I don't have the money.
Hey, plug the truck, alright?
Huh?
Plug the truck, alright?
Yeah, I know. It sucks.
Okay.
Okay, so and I think we will find out a lot. We will talk a little bit and we'll follow up on this. But let me get to the audience. I see, there's lots of comments coming in, from Sashi. I want that super happiness, and let's see if we can get that. Kuhan, thanks for checking in. Very interesting topic, and of course, South Africa is in a bit of a turmoil at this point in time. But William's on the show, and it's morning for them in South Africa. Good topic. Good morning, everyone, and good morning, William, and thanks for joining us on the show. For anyone else, we're talking about the Good Samaritan effect and what that happens. And I think maybe just before we get into bringing our guest Eugene on, one of the things as mentioned in the video is this thing called the bystander effect. So the Good Samaritan experiment was whether people would be helping somebody when they're so busy, right? What's this bystander effect, Andrea?
Bystander effect is basically when a distressful situation happens. For example, you see somebody get into an accident, right? And you see everybody on the scene is doing nothing about it. So bystander effect, you become a bystander instead of actually acting on it or helping somebody else, right? So that's a phenomena that happens when there's a community of people already at the scene and they don't do anything and you just follow and also don't do anything. So that's what the bystander effect is. And it happens a lot, and it's surprising that even as the building is on fire, an experiment that they've done, the building is on fire, there's smoke alarm, but if the room of people sits there and pretend calm and do nothing, the people who are in the experiment also do the same. They just sit there and wait,
Yep,
so that's
yep.
a very interesting phenomena. Maybe we can talk about it as well in another episode.
Sure. And I think that there's some correlation now, with that. But I if I remember, that the original experiment was the Kitty Genovese murder, right? This 28-year-old woman was stabbed, and so many people saw it happen, but nobody, everyone sort of assumed somebody else will sort of do it, and ultimately nobody reported it, and it caused that whole concept of bystander effect, similar to the Good Samaritan. So let's bring our guests again. Thanks for the couple more people joining in. Jiva, welcome to the show, and Saira, welcome to the show. Good morning in India also. That's right. It's not so early for you guys, about 10 I think in the morning now in India, but good morning to those from India also. Welcome to our show. And Andrea, we're going to have a special guest today. You want to welcome our guest in today?
Yes, so before I welcome our guest, we gotta set the context for you. He's an expert and he's somebody who I've known for many years actually, and he used to be my PC supervisor in my university. So this is somebody who is an expert in emotions, understanding that, and also in workplaces, right? And he has written a book as well, and a few other interesting research on love at work, on loving colleagues, having a work spouse. He's also written articles for Leaderonomics.com, and he's a resident author for us, and he writes a lot about positive psychology, a lot to do with emotions, a lot to do with self-awareness, mindfulness, and all these things as well. So Dr. Eugene Tee is actually an associate professor at Department of Psychology at Help University. He has attained his PhD in management from the University, and he has research interest in emotions, emotion-related processes, positive psychology, and the most interesting part is their applications for organizational context. So he's going to give us a lot of insight on that, and he's also published a lot of research in Asian Journal of Social Psychology, research on emotions in organizations, and he is also a certified trainer with HRDF, and he has conducted a lot of emotions management training sessions. So it's a lot to say about this person.
Sounds exciting. Let's bring Eugene in, and Eugene, welcome to the show, and really super glad to have you. And I've read many of your articles on Leaderonomics.com, and a lot of insights that can be garnered from the man. And I know that Andrea wants to actually play something with you, so I'm gonna leave you guys to have fun and play, right? So Andrea, take it away.
Sure. Right. So, Dr. Eugene, we're going to play something very interesting that will tie into this topic and this episode. So, it's something called Laugh or Lose, or Laugh or Die Challenge. I have no idea what Sashi has brought for us in terms of the video that we're going to watch. And our goal and our task is try not to laugh at these things. So Sashi will keep check with us and see who laughs the most and who would lose in this 1 minute clip. Are you ready?
All good to go, Andrea. So I'm up against you, is it?
Yes, I think I'm going to fail, but we will try.
Fun competition, friendly, fun competition. So take it away.
Yes. All right, cool, Sashi. Let's look at it. Oh, this is really tough. Is there supposed to be music or sound coming from a video, Sashi? I'm trying not to laugh. It's tough. I think the video is paused. No, there's no audio, Sashi. But it's okay. Okay, so I think Sashi is trying to get the audio back on. I saw Dr. Eugene cover his mouth. I don't know whether that's a laugh or a giggle.
Oh, I'll give you 1 point for that one. Sure.
Okay, all right. So we'll be waiting for that to come back on. And the reason why we're playing this game is because happiness is always sort of linked to laughter, linked to humor as well, right? And we'll talk about what are the emotions that actually come into happiness and altruism and giving in a bit. And while Sashi is getting that video ready, there's something interesting, right? I found this interesting thing that is based on this Anderson model in 2003. It says that positive emotions like kindness, other regarding love, compassion. Oh, and it's back on. Sashi, could you pause that while I finish this sentence? Yeah. So according to, yeah, the video is back on and I can hear something. But let me finish this model before we go back into that video and play that again. It says that these positive emotions like kindness, other regarding love, compassion, enhance health by virtue of pushing aside negative ones. So that's a very interesting take, and I've never really thought about it. But we'll come back to you and Dr. Eugene, your thoughts on that model in a bit. Let's go back to trying not to laugh. Sashi, on to you.
What you doing? Wanna go down? Can you go downstairs?
Oh my God! Oh no. that's a very oh my god. Okay, I think that's the end of the video, and I think I obviously have lost. Yeah, so I think that's a very funny video, and I hope that also brought some laughter to our audience today. Hopefully, those animals made you giggle or laugh out loud, as some of us will do. All right, so I'll coming back to that model, right? That Anderson model. It says that positive emotions enhance health by virtue of pushing aside negative ones. What are your thoughts, Dr. Eugene, about that?
That's a great question, Andrea. And I think what the science of positive emotions actually says is that it actually helps undo the damage or the activation brought about by negative emotions. So unpleasant emotions such as anger, such as fear, or prolonged periods of experiencing anger, frustration, and all the different variants of fear like anxiety, that actually wears and tears the body down. But on the flip side, what we're starting to see from the new research, especially those in positive psychology, is really consistent with what Anderson is claiming here, is that positive emotions undoes the damage or the activation, the wear and tear, if you will, that's brought about by regularly experiencing unpleasant emotions. And, we have a lot of that in our daily lives, right? And the situation, if we're going to speak about the situation right now, we're currently still battling a pandemic. So that wears us down psychologically. And this also has an effect on us physiologically, all right? So our bodily health is also affected by the stresses and by our emotions. So just to turn our attention to the positive emotions, right? The science is quite certain, it's actually fairly certain at this point that it undoes the negative effects brought about by negative emotions. So emotions like you mentioned there, humor, for instance, amusement, right? It's the emotion associated with humor that helps release or lower levels of cortisol, the stress hormone. And we've also seen some really interesting evidence as we talk about helping and altruism, that people who do help out do also enjoy better health, because this is associated with, I think we were having a conversation just a while ago, oxytocin, dopamine, feel good neurotransmitters that are associated with affiliation and with rewards. So I think the science is promising, and I think we can be hopeful in saying that the more we know about this, the more it is important for us to find ways to actually be kinder, be more compassionate, and also at the same time also try to inject a little bit more of humor and amusement in our lives.
And that's really interesting, right? Because if I were to put it in very layman terms, I remember we can't say the fact in research, right? The notion that it says that in order to have those positive emotions, most of us would push those negative emotions aside. And that's where humor comes into place, because if we are laughing all the time, then happiness starts to flow in, or that feeling of feel good and all those come in. And it comes back to that Good Samaritan experiment, right? I'm going to ask a very cheeky, controversial question, and it's really up to your personal opinion as well, right? Do people become altruistic, or do they give because there's so much feel good rather than the simple fact of wanting to give? I think that's a very controversial question I've received many years.
Well, I think it's also a fairly philosophical question, isn't it? Do people do good just for the sake of doing good? I've had a very cynical professor in the past say that, the most selfish thing you can do in this world is to be altruistic. Why? Because you're feeling good, right? Because you want to feel good, so the motivation is there. I don't think we need to get into this entire debate on, and not dodging the question, but I think that's more suited for philosophical debate, whether people are inherently inclined or motivated to be altruistic or otherwise. You introduced situational factors just a while ago, right? So I think just going back to your question, I think altruism, the capacity for human goodness, that's something that is innate. It can obviously be influenced by situations. There are also individual differences, as the science actually tells us. But I think what we should probably aim for is to create an environment, situations where it's easier for individuals to be altruistic, to be kind, to be generous, to be helpful. Part of that maybe means including and trying to cultivate, a sense of connectedness with other individuals, the sense that one has ample resources and time. I think you mentioned the experiment just a while ago. People who are pressed for time aren't going to be very helpful. I think we can also cultivate a sense of, just ongoing, a chain, if you will, of gratitude by paying it forward. So I'm actually quite interested to see what happens with the experiment, the results, as you show later on, right? Because I'm suspecting that those who have had that kindness given to them, who have been the beneficiaries of a kind, generous, compassionate act are themselves more inclined to pay it forward and to redirect that compassion and their gratitude to those in need as well. So I'm not sure whether that answered your question, but I think just to give you a just broad overview of the links between compassion, gratitude, and what it all means to cultivate altruism in what I would think today as being, some of the most trying and most stressful times. I think we can cultivate that. I think it just needs one simple gesture, one simple act to actually get the ball rolling, right? We'll probably see, and hopefully see, a snowball effect of altruism and kindness in a situation right now that really demands it.
I think that's a very important thing, and I think Sashi has something to say on the comments, right? He says that he hears this conversation and he's reminded of Chandler from Friends, if you watch the sitcom, who uses sarcasm and humor to deal with his issues or problems. And he asked this question, is there a danger that we could use humor to mask real issues that we don't want to face? And that's a very, very important question to ask. And what are your thoughts?
Sashi, could you be any more inquisitive, right? So just taking a page out from Chandler's book here. There we go. Okay. No, but
That's a good
also,
impression.
yeah, right. He's my favorite character in Friends, Sashi. So great question. Yes, the research does tell us that individuals do use humor as a form of coping. But I think there is a little bit more nuance in the effectiveness and the sort of applicability, if you will, the usefulness, the effectiveness of sarcasm. I think I was just going through a couple of papers recently saying that sarcasm might be helpful if you know of your team members, you're familiar enough with your team members and you want to spur creativity. So there's an interesting link there between sarcasm and creativity. It challenges individuals to be more creative, to think outside the box. But just more broadly, Sashi, I think the point you're trying to raise is that, yes, individuals can use humor as a form of coping. We've seen countless studies show that people with a healthier sense of humor, who are able to make use of the humor in the most difficult of times and circumstances, they tend to cope better. But I think this should be important. This is an important point, that we need to contextualize that in a sense that we're not using humor to suppress emotions. I think we need to acknowledge the difficult emotions that we experience, but also find some way to reframe and sort of re-look at the issue. And maybe humor gets injected into this new, a funny way, a humorous way of looking at certain issues, and that helps us cope. I don't think, though, long story short, it should be a substitute for suppressing our emotions. As a way of managing actively our emotions, yes. As a substitute, less so.
And interestingly, there's a research that found that people who laugh at their failures were more successful in dealing with those things, right? They don't suppress it, they sort of accept it, but use humor in such a way that helps them move forward. And interesting, yeah, and there's something else with this research, right? It says that psychologists now see humor as a character strength. What are your thoughts on that?
Interesting. This is from the positive psychology literature. So a sense of humor, and it is recognized as a character strength, along with your tried and true, your people who are. I think one of the other strengths is focus. Another one is dedication. Another one is commitment, motivation, all the other good stuff, right? That's associated with positive outcomes, proactivity. For those of you who are in organizations, but true. Sense of humor is also recognized as a strength, and some models of character strengths, like one from positive psychology, do recognize it as an ability to, it's a capacity to be able to reframe, to relook at difficult situations, and to sort of take the sting out, even the most difficult, demanding, and stressful of experiences. You mentioned, Andrea, failure, right? So if you can look back in your failure and you say that, you know what, I learned a lot from it, and it was actually quite funny that I tripped up in this way back then, or I said something on a live webinar a couple of years ago that I should not have said, and it went viral, right? So, but I look back at it right now, and I think that, you know what, it was a lesson learned, right? But I've taken the sting out of the mistake or the trip up that I've committed, and that actually helps me grow as an individual, right? And it's certainly better in contrast. I don't know if any studies have run a comparison, but compared with someone who wallows in, ruminates about, replays and rethinks their failures, I'm going to guess and hypothesize here that the individual who looks at the difficult situation, their failure, their trip up, right, with a sense of humor, is going to cope better and to learn better from their past mistakes.
Yeah, and I think there are research that shows that, people who dwell on their mistakes too much do not move on, and that brings them into the depths of depression as well. So
Right.
there are research that sort of explains that hypothesis you have. And that's also another question I want to ask you in terms of, emotions and understanding both the physiological and the neurological sort of understanding of it. When it comes to laughter, what actually happens? If you could help explain the science behind it. Like, we don't, like, for us normal people in a sense that do not understand neuroscience and stuff like that, when we laugh, we don't really think about what happens in the back of our head, right? Maybe you have a science behind it that can help us understand how that happens.
Certainly. And the one neurotransmitter that is often implicated or associated with the experience of amusement, right, in our response to humor is dopamine, the feel-good reward-related neurotransmitter that's associated with uplifts, rewards, attainment of goals as well as associated with dopamine. So there's been quite a number of studies coming up as well, and some have been published a couple of years ago that is associating dopamine with our experience of amusement, and that is expressed through our laughter. And I just want to extend on it because just recently as 2 years ago, there have been meta-analyses, and these meta-analyses are essentially talking about they're summarizing studies of studies. So if you do one study, that's great, but what a meta-analysis will actually do, right, is to combine all these studies together and say that overall, do we see an effect? And yes, they have actually also shown, and because of changes to our physiology, remember positive emotions such as amusement and the laughter, the physiological response, the bodily response to amusement, right? That actually resets our what we call our fight or flight activation, right? It calms us down, and it also has a long-term benefit for our health. So just to simplify that, and just to bring us back to the meta-analysis, they've also shown the effectiveness of laughter interventions, right? So some of you might have done laughter yoga before. Interestingly as well, you don't need to have spontaneous laughter even. I believe, if I remember correctly, you can just practice, just laughing. If you've been in laughter yoga before, you stood around in a circle, started mimicking laughter, eventually that forced laughter becomes an authentic expression of amusement, a real laughter, right? And so they've actually done meta-analysis of these laughter-related interventions and found that it has a positive influence in helping assisting individuals going through all kinds of mental health challenges, depression being one of the mental health challenges that individuals benefit from if they if they sort of participate in laughter-based interventions. So dopamine, laughter interventions, it resets the activation, it calms us down, it takes the sting out of the stress, so to speak, right? And I think just hopefully I'm not oversimplifying it, but that's essentially the gist of what we know so far.
Yeah, and I think that also makes sense, like, how they say, fake it until you make it, in a way.
Oh.
And it really comes from the physiological activity that helps it move along. And I think I will bring back Roshan as well, as we come back to the topic on giving, right? And there's this interesting research that came up during the COVID-19. So what the UK government did was they tried to implement a lot of help and charity across all the organizations that they are involved in and stuff like that. And they ran a research with that, and they showed that people who actually gave more during the pandemic, even though they had little to give, increased their subjective well-being, right? And you mentioned something about we have to create a sort of good environment to encourage giving and laughter, right? So I mean, this is where Roshan and Dr. Eugene can put your insights in. How do we then create that kind of environment, especially, for example, in Malaysia itself, in our organizations, in our companies, where we're all working far apart through just a laptop screen? So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Eugene, Dr. Eugene, why don't you go ahead? Yeah, I mean, be interesting, because I mean, if I look at it, a lot of the research, I mean, more and more, I think 2018 there was another big comprehensive study on, they gave about 50 people $5 a day, and they said you had a choice. You could either give it to yourself or you could give it to others. And the study, phenomenally, the folks that gave it to others, not just felt better, were much more happier in terms of levels, and had better well-being associated in general. And this was not just major giving, like $5, you just tip somebody more in the coffee shop, you put an extra buck here, extra buck there. But it was interesting, and there's many I think other sort of studies that you can kind of read, especially on Leaderonomics.com. I got so many that we've written. But I think for me, many times in this pandemic, one of the things that's interesting is that people will say, look, I don't have money to give. I don't have things to give. And I know this. I mean, when I was young, I struggled with this because, I was a young person and I didn't have things to give, right? I mean, when I was younger. But I realized there's one thing I can give. I mean, you can always give your time, but sometimes you don't have time to give also because we're young and we're trying to make life and we're trying to achieve so many things. And I found that one of the things that's easiest to give is to give of our connections. And when I was looking up historically, right, if you think about people like the Beatles and you think about even Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, and you think of Rolls and Royce, right? They were Charles Rolls and Frederick Royce, right? They didn't know each other, but because of a friend, right, they connected these guys. And a friend that connect them, and ultimately these two made a connection, Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs and Rolls and Royce and so on and so forth. They then produce something fantastic. And I realized that the best thing I can do is just connect people. And when I do that and they connect and they're happy, it makes me a lot more happier. And it also enabled me to be much richer because later on when I went for help, people were like, oh yeah, you're the guy who connected me with this guy, so I must help you out, and so on and so forth. So I think there's some practical ways to give, not necessarily sometimes we say I don't have money, nor do I have time, but maybe it's sometimes very, very simple stuff of giving. Sorry, Dr. Eugene, you were saying?
Was I? Well, I was just listening into the really insightful experiences that you have, Roshan. And I think, I've actually it's never really consciously crossed my mind that when we think about giving, it's often anchored in, okay, I have to give something material, isn't it? And I'm doing it tough right now. So it's actually very difficult for me to do so. I don't have a lot of time to actually do that, charitable works or, to mentor even individuals within my organization. But I think that's an excellent suggestion, saying that, okay, if I'm not able within my capacity right now to offer anything that's tangible material, what I can do is offer something that takes the form of a social connection, isn't it? And this is the sort of build up of social capital. We never succeed alone. I think there is a myth that says that there is the myth of self-made man or woman, isn't it? No one actually does it alone. If you do a search for one of Arnold Schwarzenegger's speeches, right, when he first came to America, he was actually helped on by so many individuals. I think that social connection, the social sort of bonds that you've actually helped foster, that can also be something that is advocated, if not outwardly encouraged. God knows we're all stretched for time, we're all stretched for, our attentional resources are limited. We're spending, like you said, a lot of time on screen. So if we are not within the capacity to directly assist, right, at the very least, but I think I'm using the term at the very least here as, in quote marks, because I think it's got a powerful spillover carry forward effect, as you've already highlighted and realized. It's gonna be reciprocated by individuals in the future, right? By people who recognize you, Roshan, right, who have helped them out in times of need, and they're going to reciprocate in kind as well. What you are actually doing is building connections, right, between individuals, and I think that there's a collective benefit as a result of what you're doing.
Yep. And there's an interesting question from Ridi in India who says, look, in Harry Potter, Lupin asked Harry to remember his most happy memory to defend himself against the Dementors. Does leveraging happy memories work for us too, in terms of, I guess this is in light of happiness, right? And this is a Potter fan. Looks like there's quite a few Potter fans among those listening. There's a couple other comments coming in, but your thoughts on that very quickly, and then let's get back to, I think giving us quite a few more things that we can talk about in the giving space. Go ahead, Eugene.
Thank you, Roshan. And thank you, Ridi, for that comment and that reference there. I am not a big Harry Potter fan as I am with other franchises, but I think your question there relates to, do we take the time to recognize and realize the good that we still have? And certainly, if you're talking about cultivation of gratitude, what you still have, the benefits, the sort of support that you still have relative to that of others, then I think it has been shown as well, some positive emotions, right, in light of the difficult circumstances that we're in right now, that is essential. I do want to caution, however, that this does not mean suppressing or disregarding your negative emotions. I think those need to be managed as well. But as a complement to all the other approaches that you're doing in helping you manage those difficult emotions during this time, you're taking good care of yourself, getting enough sleep, eating right, staying connected with individuals that matter with you, you can also complement that with approaches that increase or what we call upregulate your experience of positive emotions. So hopefully that addresses the question that you've raised.
Fantastic. And I just want to zoom back a little bit on the Good Samaritan experiment. I think one of this, I think as we look at that experiment, I guess the purpose of that experiment was really to look at, whether it was dispositional matters, like, whether this person was very religious or so on, or situational issues. And ultimately, we found that dispositional factors had actually no bearing on helping behaviors, and it was a lot more situational. And I think part of that has some implications, right? And if we structure environment in such a way that is hard to give or hard to help, right? Ultimately, we will then see a bias towards not helping, right? And how do we then structure it? And you see there are certain nations like Japan, right, where people just act in a way that is helpful to each other, and we say it's cultural, right? But it's also how society has been built, right? Structurally designed to some extent. So how, if we talk about the workplace, right, especially as leaders, and slowly as we hopefully get back to the workplace, what do we need to be structuring Good Samaritan friendly workplaces rather than, and that's, you think about a lot of innovation today, it's about collaboration, it's about breaking the silos among departments. A lot of it requires Good Samaritan type behavior for the workplace to thrive. What should be measures that we take organizationally, especially for leaders listening in, to enable Good Samaritan behaviors to be replicated and enhanced in your organization?
Oh, that's a tough question, but I do relish difficult questions. And so you've gotten me thinking a little bit, Roshan, about how we reward individuals in organizations. And I think this is a time in which we can either go cooperative or we can take on or just stick with our more competitive nature, isn't it? If we think about reward structures, reward systems in organizations, it's often based on, key performance indicators, tangibles, isn't it? Very little, I think, as far as I'm aware of as much as I've spoken to organizations before, is a reward that is based on any incident or any indication that this person has been especially helpful, compassionate, cooperative during this time. Is this individual, or has this individual exemplified some of the values that we want to see during this difficult situation? So if we can, in a way, this sounds almost like a radical suggestion, but the next time you call out individuals, right, maybe not just for the tangible performance, maybe not so for saying that Roshan actually worked extra hard, he burned the midnight, or he had sleepless nights to a point where he drove sales up. No, why not highlight, say, Roshan, I think, this is not actually adequately captured on the key performance indicators, but we've heard a lot of stories about you lending a supportive hand, reaching out to individuals, the junior colleagues in the organization who are struggling to fit in, to sort of get accustomed to the culture in our organization. And they're finding it really tough because there is no proper formal onboarding process. So there's no water cooler conversations that would otherwise have happened in a face-to-face setting. But I've heard stories, Roshan, that you were there and you actually brought all these new members on board. You, help by advising them, how they should actually start up their careers here in our organization. Our new hires are especially appreciative. So I think we need to highlight that quite a fair bit, right? To reward and to acknowledge the individuals who are playing these more cooperative, social glue. They are the social glue, isn't it, for the organization? And just very quickly, I think when you mention silos, I think we need to identify individuals in the organization whom we can refer to as boundary spanners. So these are individuals who work outside silos, who have connections between different organizations, different departments as well. And they are the go-to people to help establish the links. Let's not fool ourselves by saying that we can break down silos by bringing two departments together, putting them in the same room, just catering lots of yummy food for them, and then they'll naturally bond and jive with one another. I think we need to have these boundary spanners as potential change champions to break down the walls of the silos that have been enacted by different organizations, right? So I think start off by, having informal catch-up sessions. These boundary spanners are going to, connect their department with that of the individuals from a different department. So I think, firstly, just to summarize, changing what we reward, and what we acknowledge during this time. Remember, the context is different. And secondly, boundary span.
Fantastic. I think there's some good ideas. And, I think a discussion like this is one of my favorite books, again, by Wharton's, one of your youngest faculty, is Adam Grant's Give and Take. And this, I mean, one of the things he brought out I thought was very interesting, because he said a lot of givers, they burn out because they're giving and they're not taking, and ultimately they burn out. And he talked about 3 types of people, right? The givers, the matchers, and the takers. And he says the givers are the ones that are giving, and then the matchers, they say, you give, I give, you don't give, I don't give. And the takers, they just take, they never give at all, right? And he says that ultimately, if you look at successful people, they are, and the most unsuccessful people, very interesting, he found there are 2 types of givers. The most unsuccessful people are givers, right? So the bottom of the food chain is the people who give, and they burn out and they go through depression. And then he says the most successful people are also givers. They give, and somehow they become very successful. And it's not that they take, but they know how to manage their giving. And he talks about the right kind of giving and the right kind of not giving, and avoiding burnout and things like that. So I thought it was very interesting that ultimately it's givers who become very successful in organizations. And I think one of the things that I like to understand a little bit, and maybe you can give us some, how do you reach that right point, where you're giving and you're successful? I mean, I showed you the example when I started connecting people and giving of what I could give. People started to thank me, and likewise, I remember one when I was very young. I realized that I was very good in tech, and a lot of my I was in accounting, right? And in the accounting space, I have 40 older folks who just knew accounting but didn't know tech. And I realized I could automate a lot of the accounting processes. And I would go one by one to each accountant and automate it, And for me, I learned so much about accounting because they would teach me all these processes, and this is how imputed interest work, and this is how tax work, and so on. And I will automate it. But on the flip side, they were so thankful that I took away their jobs. I mean, to some extent, made their jobs so much easier that I got promoted, right? and became a lot bigger than many of them in the process. So I realized that was smart giving, where I was learning as much as I was giving. But how do you draw the line that you don't end up giving, which is that bad kind of giving? I wouldn't say bad, right? No giving is bad, but giving to the point that you get burnout, depressed, and ultimately you don't want to give anymore, and you go into this state. So I know that's this tipping point, but how do you get the right mix in terms of giving?
Interesting you should mention the Give and Take, isn't it, which is a book by Adam Grant. I think what you've hit upon really nicely there, Roshan, is the idea of complementarity. So you mentioned the idea of giving your technical expertise to a group of accountants, and they in turn actually offered, right, their experience, their know-how in the industry. So I think...
But you didn't know that when you gave, right? I mean, automatically you give first, and then somehow you get, right, to some extent.
Right. So I think it's useful to actually recognize the landscape, if you will, of what the other individual actually needs and what they actually value you for. And in some of my other classes, I tell my students, guys, what kind of power do you have? Actually, I don't have any power. Actually, I'm not some big name CEO. I don't have any formal work experience. I say don't discount yourselves. I think the path to actually influence and the path to actually giving something that is value is to recognize what you have that the other individual will definitely need, but they don't necessarily have. So in your case, just going back to your example again, Roshan, it's the technical expertise, isn't it? And many times we conflate or confuse this idea of being influential and being powerful as a formal title of individuals having gray hairs and a lot of wrinkles on their skin. I think it's time that we take a step away from that and to recognize as well that the world is changing a lot more quickly than it is. Technological know-how, for instance, right, might be something that folks in the younger generation, for those of you who are actually listening to this right now, they might become, or they are already a lot more accustomed to, right? Recognize first, I think, just to simplify my answer here, where there's complementarity, right, where you can give to a point where it benefits the other individual, but does not drain you to a point of what you were saying there, completely burnt out, completely depressed, right? Leverage on your skills, your own unique experiences. Think about something that you can offer the other individual, right? And also, I think just to be pragmatic about this, when you stand to gain from from delivering or providing this assistance. I think we are trying to harmonize this almost give and take mechanism to say that, look, it's going to come together well enough, right? If I bring together my skills and I learn from you, in return, you benefit from my technological know-how. And I think I would say your bosses back in the when you were an accountant, Roshan, they also benefited from the feeling that, you know what, I feel good mentoring Roshan Jr. here.
Yep, absolutely. And it's a bunch of good articles, I think, that are being flashed by different people, on Leaderonomics, the different websites. So feel free to leverage these different articles, and you can read more about giving. I think it's one of the most powerful business success determinants. And it's something people remember you for. I think it's legacy building to some extent, right? People don't really remember the numbers that you close or the deals that you close, but people do remember the feeling that you provided for them when you helped them and we took them through a certain situation. And sometimes I forget, right? Many times I've forgotten that I've helped this person or a son to be connected with someone, and somehow they got a job, and so on. And like 20 years later, they remind me. I'm like, okay, yes, but it's and you still feel good, right? Oh yeah, I feel good about that. I also want to highlight there's some fantastic articles that Eugene has written, Dr. Eugene, Blinded by Unawareness, Positive Psychology, and why we are not as self-aware as we think we are to be ourselves. So, feel free to leverage these articles, click it and watch it. And Eugene, as we close out this segment, what are your final thoughts and advice, when we talk about this theme of giving and happiness? Humor is one piece of it, but I think really sometimes the giving part is a lot more powerful than just the laughter part, I feel personally. Maybe not grounded by science, but what sort of final thoughts and advice that you'd like to leave us with, as we close out this show?
Absolutely. I think there is science backing that, Roshan. So what you're saying is actually straight, correct, accurate, reflective of the research that we have right now. I'm just reminded of a statement that was made by an emotions researcher, and also, right, a few of the monks, right? So this was a very interesting summit that combined the science and wisdom of emotion. So there was a dialogue and conversation between emotion scientists, right, and Buddhist monks as well. And one of the things that really stuck with me, I'm still going through all the video recordings, but one of the things that has stuck with me so far is that the state of compassion, the state of being kind, is actually a natural state for a lot of individuals, for us as human beings, right? And I think that's more needed now more than ever, right? And I think I don't think I'm misquoting Dalai Lama here. His Holiness once said that if you want others to be happy, practice compassion. If you want to be happy, practice compassion as well. So the overarching theme from that is, the idea that we are made and we are innately good. I think that can be a very, very powerful sort of, a mantra almost to guide us through the most difficult and stressful times here. Compassion as the overarching good. We've seen a lot more research also tell us that when people give, they have this fuzzy feeling, right? Scientists have a term for it. They call it the warm glow effect. And I think we just need to recognize that in a world that is so right now devoid of care, compassion, as rifts, right? We don't need to draw lines between race and religion. A lot of places in the world already have. We don't need to draw further lines. I think we need something that brings us together. I think at the very root of that giving is the emotion of compassion. Absolutely.
I think that's really well said. And, for those of us, still people joining us, thanks for Erasmus has joined us. Thanks for joining us, and great to have you on our show. And I think one of the things as we close out is, I think that point about situationalism, how I really believe it, is the tools that you provide your employees, the means of context that you provide in an environment ultimately determines whether it's a giving environment or it's a taking environment. Your reward structure, like you talked about, when you build it in an individual reward structure where it's all about taking and dog eat dog, you're going to get that kind of a behavior. And ultimately, you're going to get a lot of depression and anxiety and pain and those sort of naturally fight or flight sort of pieces come together, right? So as leaders, I think it's imperative for us, right? And I find one of the things that was most powerful for us was, when we developed or when we partnered to see this product called Happily, right? It's really about how do you enable others to give. You can give others coins, you can reward others, you can recognize others, you can talk and say, look, I've got an idea, but I don't know what to do, and let's have a town hall, and anybody can do that, right? And I think you need to build those structures, or at least take advantage. I mean, technology gives us an opportunity to enable people to really have power, at least perceived level of power, to enable that, and then that's Budaya. So, as we close out, Dr. Eugene Tee, thank you so much for joining us. It's been fantastic having you. Love to have you again and hear your thoughts. Maybe our next episode we can talk a little bit about the bystander effect, and I think there's some power in there, right? Because if we know that this is how we are going to act when other people act, we can take something to be self-aware, and so we can take action to go against our nature of doing what other people do, and we can talk about that next week. But I want to end with just short little video on Happily, a really simple app that helps you tweak your environment so that you can enable the Good Samaritan effect to be permeated in your organization. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next Wednesday, 12:30, same time, same week. Not same week, but same time, same day. Wednesday, 12:30 p.m. GMT +7 or GMT +8. We'll see you next week. Here's Happily for you. Goodbye. Have a great one.
Take care.
And to close it out, we will end with the Good Samaritan, the finale, right? We wanted to see the finale of the video, so let's watch the finale as we wrap up this show.
Come on, buddy. How you doing? We ate a lot of, slices. You want the rest? All right, here you go, man.
To do, I can't get her medicine, it's so bad.
Let's watch my backpack for me.
Yeah, I got you.
I'll be right back.
Okay.
I'm really hungry and it's hard out there, man. You have an extra slice in there? Yeah, you sure? You wouldn't mind?
Hey, sir, what's up?
How you feeling?
Huh?
How you feeling?
I'm feeling good, man. I'm still trying to figure it out, and I have your backpack. I'm still trying to figure it out and everything, you know what I mean? What happened to your bags?
I just took it back to where I got it. Just started over there. You have to take care of your daughter,
You returned your pillows, your sleeping bags, just give me, my daughter, my medicine?
Yeah.
Why would you do that, though? You didn't have to do
I
that.
looked pretty stressed out, I can remember plenty of times.
Don't you need that stuff, though?
I'd get by without it.
Thank you once again. I appreciate it so much. And I want to being so generous to me. I want to give you a nice little tip, man. Thank you. God bless you, all right?
You've been putting quarters in the whole time.
Yeah, you took off and I was trying to stop you like, hey. Yeah, man.
No, man.
I want you to get a ticket.
I actually did that on purpose, man. I was shooting a social experiment. My camera guy's right there. You see behind the fence?
Oh, hey.
You actually sacrificed your money It's the money that you could have used to buy some food, the money that you could have used to do something for yourself, but you spent it on me not getting a ticket. You didn't even have to do that, you know what I mean?
Oh man, that's just the little I have, man. After all I've been through on this street, man, it's just cool, and I just thought I would help you out.
Here's another $500, man.
You're kidding me.
No, man. Give me a hug, man.
Oh my God.
Give me a hug, man.
Hey, thanks for out, man.
That, you know, like what you did, that really, no, don't cry, don't cry. Please don't cry, please don't cry. That seriously means a lot to me, man. I can't believe that you actually did that, man. Keep that money, go get yourself a room.
This is a lot of money, bro.
No, man, it's cool, no worries, man.
Bro, you sure this is not I've never received this much money from anybody.
No, man, no, it's all yours now, man.
Wow, man.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Have a good day, man.
God bless you.